You can't be a non-believer in your action, you see, because Harris's metaphysics is fundamentally Christian. So he acts out a Christian metaphysics, but he says, well, I don't believe it. It's like, well, yeah, you do, because you're acting it out. You just say you don't believe it.
During an interview, public intellectual Jordan Peterson criticized Sam Harris, a leading atheist, for being something of a covert believer, a closet Christian, if you will. Peterson explained that while Harris professes atheism, his actions are dictated by his old beliefs in the Bible. The examples he gave were bad. He said, for instance, that Harris still doesn't rob banks and doesn't kill people. Now, I think we can all agree that you don't really have to believe that God made the world in 7 days for you not to point a gun at a stranger's face. And yet, there is something about Peterson's arguments that rings true. So, could we do any better? Could we show that Harris's atheism would be a different kind of atheism had he been raised in a non-Christian culture, like, say, the pagan culture of ancient Greece? Well, although cloning the man is out of the question, there are some surprising examples of pagan atheists who, like Harris, gave up on their faith in the name of science. Instead of new atheists, however, these early critics of religion became polyatheists, claiming that truth, scientific as it might be, is not one but many. One of them is a man whose name conjures glorious feasts and all pleasures of the flesh imaginable, but was in fact a scientist. He was Epicurus, and while his rejection of religion rings surprisingly modern, his final conclusions on reality might just prove Peterson correct. Epicurus was born in 341 BC on the island of Samos, and his troubles with religion started early. It was said that when, as a young man, he asked his teachers what the great Hesiod, Greece's most important authority on religion, second only to Homer, meant when he said that the world came from chaos, he got no answer back. And so he turned to science and the groundbreaking ideas of the atomists, philosophers who were among the first to propose a theory that all reality was composed of small, indivisible units. Units they called atoms, meaning no cut in Greek. Accepting and further developing their theories, Epicurus began to see how all of existence was physical in its essence, as it was made from nothing more than atoms and void, leaving no place for gods and demons. Because at the bottom of this early materialism was the idea that everything is ultimately made from the same basic stuff, the same atoms. And even if the gods were to exist, they would also have to be made from these atoms, making them no more divine than a sun around which planets rotate. Because according to this view, nature is uniform, with nothing higher and nothing lower, nothing divine and nothing profane. A universe where the differences between lead and gold, between a storm and the changes in our emotions are nothing but the ways in which atoms move through the void. It was the beginning of a theory that has since become a scientific fact and has since been renamed as reductive materialism, or simply science, as this view has grown to become the only acceptable by modern man. It's the theory that Sam Harris espoused when he had his own religious quest frustrated, and has been using it ever since in debate after debate against those who still believe there is something more than physical reality, reminding them that even the strangest of phenomena, like their mystical experiences, can be explained by reducing them back into their physical components, their atoms, or even neurons, the brain's equivalent unit of indivisible reality. Imagine that. Our most cherished thoughts and emotions are made up of atoms. But although reason seems to reign supreme for both the ancient and modern materialists, as represented by Epicurus and Sam Harris respectively, there is at least one crucial difference between the two. One that could arguably prove that religious beliefs grow deeper than these atheists are willing to accept. See, being a modern scientist, Harris claims that there is ultimately one objective reality and only one set of rules to explain it, the proverbial laws of physics that were first conceived by Isaac Newton and developed ever since. But thousands of years before him, and although he too accepted that reality is nothing but matter, and that matter is nothing but atoms put together in different ways, Epicurus was different, because throughout his work, this proto-scientist urges his students to follow what he calls the theory of multiple explanations, pleonachos tropos. In a letter to one of his favorite pupils, Epicurus accounted for the variations in the moon's shape within a given month. To our satisfaction, he rejects the mystical methods that were inherited from the Near East. But to our surprise, Epicurus continues by giving not one, but 3 different causes, all based on science, but entirely different from each other. It could be a sign of intellectual humility, as Epicurus would certainly have been aware of how little one could know during the 4th century before Christ. But that is not really the point. See, modern scientists, or at least the best among them, are also and often painfully aware of their limitations. And yet they remain convinced about the existence of a single cause for each and every phenomenon, even if they are uncertain of what that cause might be. But it gets crazier, as there is reason to assume that Epicurus believed that these multiple solutions are true at the same time. As in the same letter to his student, he says that the phenomena discussed there, the phases of the moon, force one to accept that they have come about in many ways, and he explicitly states that those who adopt only one explanation are in conflict with the facts and are utterly mistaken as to the way in which man can attain knowledge. I mean, how much clearer could it be? And here comes the punchline. Could it be that atheists are not as rational as they think? Could it be that, despite their conscious rejection of religion, both Epicurus and Sam Harris are still subconsciously controlled by its basic assumptions? And that the reason why Harris insists on a single truth, a single set of laws behind everything, is that he was raised in a religion that also believed in a single God as the creator of everything, the one God of the Bible. Epicurus, on the other hand, was born into a pagan culture, one that believed in 12 causes at the very least, a culture for which the sun moved drawn by the fiery horses of Helios, while thunder was caused by the anger of Zeus, the two of them occasionally clashing. Perhaps what Professor Peterson was trying to say then, during his interview, was that when Sam Harris turned from a monotheist to an atheist, he became a mono-atheist, believing in what modern science believes almost dogmatically, that every phenomenon, from water boiling on a stove to the phases of the moon, obeys to a single set of rules. But when Epicurus did the same, he became a polyatheist, insisting that different set of laws apply to different things. Both rejected the native religions on the surface, but the question remains, did they ever move beyond the basic assumptions about reality? And so, with only a few changes, many would believe that the writings of Epicurus came from the 21st century. But he does put these arguments with a poetic beauty that is often absent in the new atheists. In one passage, for example, he makes the argument that even though religious belief could occasionally and only by accident get things right, it is far better to follow in the way of science, as it is better to be rationally unfortunate than irrationally fortunate, and that it's better for a beautiful choice to have the wrong results than for an ugly choice to have the right results only by chance.